So it's you're thinking about quitting your job, so you've got more time for you and more family time. So I want to go through today some of the things that I think you should consider before you make that decision. So welcome to another Money Monday, and it's been a pretty wild start to the day if you're living in Sydney. A bit of a storm coming through. But if you're not in Sydney, then you don't care about that. So let's get on with some of the things that I think we should be looking at about making that decision on whether or not you want to quit your job so that you can have that more you time, more family time. It's a desire a lot of people have, and it's something that you may not be thinking about right now, but these things I'm going to go through, I think you can apply to your scenario anyway as something that you might aspire to, so that you're not caught in the day-to-day grind of a job, which you've probably heard before as being described as just over broke. So there's lots of people out there who do aspire to move away from that job scenario and get themselves in a position where they can swap the cubicle for more time with their family, more time for themselves to do the things that they love to do. So let's have a look at 5 things that I think you can or should consider before you make the big decision to leap from your full-time job. So first one up is, how big is your emergency fund or your emergency buffer in our terminology? And so it's really important before you make a decision to leave a full-time job that you've got some of the fundamental basics of your financial situation understood and in place. And you'll know, if you've been around the Investors Way long enough, you'll know that we promote an emergency buffer of a minimum of 3 months of your living expenses, but preferably 6 months. And depending on what you're planning to do once you walk away from a full-time job, the number that you have in your emergency buffer might need to be larger to accommodate what it is you plan to do. So really important that in making the decision to move away from full-time work or quitting your job is that you don't create more money anxiety by making that decision. The whole purpose of this decision is to be able to be more free and more able to spend time with your family. You don't want that time to be consumed with money worries or money anxieties. So the first thing is to have a look at your emergency buffer, your emergency fund, and make sure it's a minimum of 3 months, preferably 6 months of your living expenses are in that fund before you make the leap. The second thing I want you to consider before you decide to leave or quit your full-time job is how much of your living expenses can you cut. Now, this is not necessarily promoting a scarcity mindset, but the simple fact is that we all get into a position with a regular flow of income that little expenses creep in to our living scenario, and so we end up with probably excess spending that we don't really need. So it's a good opportunity to have a look at what those lifestyle expenses are that you currently have, and how many of them could you live without, and how many could you quite easily give the chop so that they're not an additional drain on your cash flow. And the really good part about this one is, the first step there was to look at your emergency buffer. If, as part of determining whether you got 3 or 6 months worth of living expenses available, if you complete part 2, you'll identify potentially a smaller monthly living expenses requirement, which means that emergency buffer doesn't need to be as large as well. So it's a double win scenario if you're able to remove the non-essential expenses from your monthly spending plan, which I'm sure you've all got now, and that will help reduce, again, some of that money anxiety and the drain on your cash flow that may or may not be a problem depending on what it is that you're planning to do once you quit your job. So Second thing there is to have a look at your lifestyle expenses and work out which ones are no longer going to be necessary or just don't really fill you with excitement and joy. And there's lots of things here like magazine subscriptions or live streaming subscriptions. You might have 3 or 4 of them. Maybe you can get by with just one. Those type of things. And have a look at those and see how you might be able to cut your living expenses. The third thing I want you to have a look at is, before you quit your job, is can you create an income stream from home? So this is a really good one in that more and more people are moving away from the 9-to-5 working scenario. And I saw some statistics a while ago that said that in Australia alone, the workforce was going to change so dramatically that millions of jobs would no longer be needed in the future. And so there's a real movement towards people working from home and working on their own businesses and becoming their own entrepreneurs. So have a look at whether or not there's something that you're really passionate about and you're really good at. And if you are good at something that fills you with joy, then maybe you can create a business around that passion and that passion project. Or whatever that skill is that you might have, you might be able to create a business from that skill and work from home and have the freedom and the flexibility of the hours that you invest into that venture that you've created from home. So again, when you're making this leap, the thing to keep in mind is if you are going to set up a business, there's going to be additional costs related to setting up that business and getting it off the ground. These things don't just fly off the shelf and instantly replace your income. There's going to be some work there. There's going to be some time there where you're spending a bit. So you need to think about what those expenses are going to be. You need to be realistic or not to be too optimistic about what your income goals are going to be in the first 1 to 2 years of setting up that business. And trust me, from someone who's done this, building a business from home or predominantly from home is not for those that suffer from the instant gratification disease. If you are expecting everything to happen overnight, then maybe this is not the best option for you, because building a business, whether it's from home or even a normal business that people create, these things take time to build. And so important that you understand that there are going to be expenses and there are going to be fluctuating cash flows with the creation of this new business. So think about that. Third thing there is, can you create an income or a business from home to replace the income that you were receiving through your job? Or it may not even have to replace it, but at least generate some cash flow to keep you your financial scenario under control. The fourth thing to consider before you decide to quit your job and spend more time with your family is what impact this is going to have on your investment and retirement goals. So you've probably got some big financial goals that you've set and are keen to ensure that you continue to be able to do that beyond walking away from a paid job. So this is a real big one in that you need to consider how you continue to contribute to your retirement fund, your superannuation or your 401k, depending on where you are, and also how you continue to grow your wealth. So your wealth generator, using our terminology, how will you be able to continue to contribute to your wealth generator so that you are building up those passive income streams. So you might make the decision to quit your job once you have a number of those things in place and you've got those passive income streams, and that's fantastic. But if they're not quite sufficient to meet those living expenses when you first make the decision, then you'll want to know how you're going to be able to continue to grow those investments so that you can get to a position where the passive income streams from your investments are covering your living expenses. So it might be that the first step is not to quit your job entirely, but maybe cut back your hours and just build up momentum towards the decision to quit your full-time job for good. And so the other option might be, if you're only making a decision to do this for a period of time, then it might be a a cycle in your life where you've got young kids and you want to be home with the young kids and then you return later, then you can manage that plan by understanding how long you're going to be out of the workforce and how long you need to fund without that ongoing income or salary coming in. So think about ways, again, that you can scale back your expenses and keep pace with your investing goals so that you don't fall behind just by making the decision to quit a job and spend more time with your family or have more you time, which is everyone's ultimate goal, obviously, is to have that freedom. And then the fifth thing that I want you to consider before you quit your job is whether or not you need to maintain any particular skills if you plan to re-enter the workforce. So markets are moving really quickly these days, and so short periods of time out of the workforce might require you to get reskilled before you can go back into the workforce. So again, have a plan and work out, if it is just while your kids are young that you plan to quit your job, work out how you'll stay connected to your industry and maintain your skills so that that your skills don't become outdated and you're able to re-enter the workforce relatively simply because you've kept up to date with the skill set that you have and that you specialize in, and you're able to at least demonstrate that you've maintained those skills in some way. So again, have a plan for it, and allocate costs for that professional development, if that's how you want to call it, and so that you know that you'll be prepared, if need be, to re-enter the workforce with the skills that are current at the time that you decide to jump back in. And so they're the 5 things that I recommend you consider before making the decision to quit your job. But I also suggest from personal experience that it is something really worth considering if you're in the financial position to do it, because having that additional family time, being around when things need to be done, or just all those things that come from being available to your family when they need you, are a massive advantage and a great joy. And so from my experience, I highly recommend you look at the 5 things that we've just gone through. And just to recap on those, it was how big is your emergency fund? It's what do you need to do to cut your lifestyle expenses? Can you create an income from home? And how will you maintain your investing goals and your retirement funding with less income coming in? And finally, the 5th thing was, how would you maintain your skills if you were to plan to re-enter the workforce? So let us know what you think about the concept of quitting your job to have more time with your family and more you time, more personal time, more freedom, more choice. I know, again, speaking personally, one of the great things about Mondays these days is I don't dread them. I don't dread getting out of bed and having to make the commute to a full-time job. So have a think about how that might apply to your scenario. Let us know in the comments what you think about the options available to you and whether or not it's something you plan to do. And have a great week. We'll see you again next week for another Money Monday. Cheers.